Joined by me, started getting into heavy deadlifts probably about a year ago. Before that, didn't really do any, just did a bunch of RDLs and leg curls for the hamstrings, and then kind of got the form down with deadlifts. So carry over on that, did a lot of research with it, and then started progressions with clients and started putting their deadlifts up to high numbers and going from there. So today we're going to go over a whole big deadlift kind of history, also variations and progressions, and just working on the whole mobility, stability type through the effort of the deadlift and making sure everyone can do that. So what is a deadlift? It's not raising the dead, but it's direct lifting without any mechanical assistance. So in other words, it's lifting a dead weight off the floor by using all of your strength. Pull, not push. A lot of people will push the weight up, they'll push their feet into the ground and push themselves vertical. This one's a pull. It's a horizontal pull that pulls the weight vertically. So you're pulling your hips through to pull the weight up. It's one of the three main power lifts. The other two are bench press and squatting. Here's a quick look at form. This is an example of good form, as the figure says. Going through from, we'll kind of start from the top and work our way down. So the head is aligned with the torso, maximizing neutral drive to the body. As you can see, this person is looking straight ahead, not up, not down. Their head is aligned so that their spine is aligned all the way through. So it's in a more advantageous position. If that spine has any kind of curvature at the top where the head is, just strictly speaking right now, that puts you in a more disadvantageous position. Going over here, the back is flat with a slight lordotic curve, minimizing stress to the posterior ligamentous system and spinal vertebrae. So, looking at this, with the flat back, the slight lordotic curve is in the lumbar part of your spine, and that slight lordotic curve is kind of the little, very small crescent shape right here in the back. Sometimes a little rounding is allowed on the lift, but when you are in the setup position, that should be what you're trying to aim for before you pull the weight. So if you can, you want to record yourself doing a deadlift to see if you can get in that position, or obviously have somebody spot you and look at you while you're doing it to make sure that you are getting into that position. Because a lot of times if you're looking straight ahead in your setup, you can't tell me, so you don't know where you're at. Going over here, arms form a 10-degree angle from shoulder to the grip on the bar. So you can kind of see where her elbows are at, 10 degrees forward from the bar. That also puts your shoulders a little more forward from the bar too. You shouldn't be behind the bar. That means you want to bring that bar as close to you as possible and make sure that your chest is up, your spine is in that neutral position, which allows that bar to be where it's at and allows that 10-degree variance there. You can ask now.
Because I've heard you tell people shins parallel,
Vertical.
Vertical versus a little slant tool.
Yep.
So you should try to get them as straight as you can.
Yeah, straight up and down. Yep. And I'm going to go over that in just a little bit too.
Okay.
But we can talk about it now. You can't really, I didn't go over it on this one yet because you can't really see her shins or this person's shins. So looking at it, her shins are probably a little more forward than what I would want to be. I would tell her to get back just a little bit. But she's also in the setup position. She's not pulling yet. If she were to be pulling, her butt might go back just a little bit. Her hips might drive back where the shins become vertical as she pulls up. So when I say vertical shins, that's usually going to get you in the spot where you need to be through all of this. A lot of times getting in that vertical shin form will take care of almost everything else that you need it to. Your butt's going to be back far enough where your spine will automatically be in neutral, where your hips are, or where your hips are if you have vertical shins. So keeping those vertical shins will help with that straight pull. If you don't have the vertical shins, that shoulder is going to be way more than 10 degrees, or that ankle is going to be way more than 10 degrees because you're going to be more forward. And if you think about when you're going to pull up, now the weight's on the front of your foot, more in the ball of your foot or middle of the foot, when you want it to be more towards your heels, or kind of distributed from the heels and the middle of the foot. So when you're forward like that, you're actually pulling the bar a lot longer than it needs to be too. If you can pull it straight up, that's obviously going to have less distance than if you have like a little curvature where you can pull it up too. Okay? The bar is positioned above the shoelaces, keeping the weight in line with the body center of gravity. That's pretty much what I just talked about there without kind of looking at this one. So, again, that bar is right above the shoelaces. Bringing it as close as you can to the bar is positioned directly beneath the shoulder blades, optimizing transfer of power from the hips to the bar. So, you can see your shoulders are a little bit in front of the bar. The shoulder blades are right in line with it. And that comes from retracting and engaging the shoulder blades through the whole movement too, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. Coaching cues. Number one, Larry just asked, vertical shins. This is my number one go-to coaching cue to any client. And then all of you that are in here, you hear me say it time and time and time again. What's funny is that your body tries to get you out of this, so you have to push yourself into this position. And when you know that you're there and you do your deadlift, 10 times out of 10, you know that you did it right. It just feels good. It feels like you mechanically did it right. There's no weird pull anywhere else. It's right on line. Stomach's got to stay tight. In other words, keep your core tight. Again on that, I don't mean to suck your stomach in and try to act like you got to squeeze it that way. You're bracing your stomach. You're pushing out like you see somebody coming to punch you. You're not going to suck in. You're going to brace your core so you can create an impact. Okay? Engage your shoulder blades, which helps lock in the lats. You retracting and engaging those shoulder blades and pulling them down will help engage your lat muscles, which a lot of people don't use during the deadlift. And you're working everything on your posterior side of the deadlift, which is including your lats. If you don't know where your lats are, there's huge back muscles back here. When people don't really pull with them, they're using their lower back, and that's how people get hurt. And it's usually because their shoulder blades aren't engaged. Okay? Butt back, butt down, head up. Keep your spine in line. So if we went back to the other slide and looked at this really quick, your butt's back, your butt's down, your head's up. Okay? That, again, creates that neutral spine. You grip the floor with the weight on your heels. What I mean by gripping the floor, if you think about how monkeys walk, where they actually have toes kind of on their feet, I guess, or hands on their feet, they're going to grip the floor, and they're going to try and curl them back as they're walking so they can grip things. Okay? Your toes. Yep. So in a sense, that's what you want to try and do. I don't have a foot diagram on my slide, but if you look at the bottom of my shoe, there's kind of 3 points of contact. There's 2 up here, kind of at the balls of your feet and the heel, and you want to try and think that you got to bring those 3 points together. Okay? That's called gripping the floor. That's done on most lower body workouts, but it's especially effective on like a squat or a deadlift. Also keeping the weight distributed from the heels, so in a sense you want to make sure that you're staying back. You pull the hips in, you don't shrug or pull back with the elbows. What I mean by this, you're pulling your hips in. It's that horizontal pull. You're not pushing it up. You're not pulling up. You're pulling your hips in. Okay? When you get to that upright position of the deadlift, you're also not shrugging like this to help get you an extra inch or two. That's wrong. Okay? You're not really using your traps for that in this one. You're also not pulling back. So when you get to that upright position, you're not going to try and extend your spine by going through something like this. Again, that's going to be how you get hurt. A lot of times guys will sit there and they'll try and pull way back like this. That's not correct. You squeeze the glutes as hard as you can, and that's as far back as you pull. If there's a little leeway there, that's okay, but you don't want to keep going through that. How do we work? Stability and mobility. You must be stable before we are mobile. What I mean by stability and mobility is that our joints in our body are created to specifically be stable or mobile. Here we go. Starting from the feet going up to the shoulders. Your feet are stable. Your ankles are mobile. Your knees are stable. Your hips are mobile. Your lumbar spine is stable. Your thoracic spine is mobile. Your shoulder blades and scapula areas are stable. And your shoulders are mobile. Okay? There's a difference between shoulder blades and scapula. Shoulder blades obviously down here, scapula. Shoulders are up top here. This is where you want the mobility to be able to reach back and have full range of motion through your arms, shoulder blades need to be stable so you can create that good environment to have actually more mobility. It is possible for our body to switch these types of environments in our joints from mobile to stable or stable to mobile. And that's just because of bad posture or bad form or bad habits. You gotta be careful what you're good at. If you do something wrong for a while, your body's gonna try and get into the most, it's gonna resort to the most strengthening position, and sometimes that'll switch environments in your body. So, what I said before, we have to become stable before we are mobile. We have to make sure our feet are stable. So we have to make sure our knees are stable, our lumbar spine, and our shoulder blades. Okay? And I usually work in that order. Unless the shoulder blades are really nasty, then we'll start with them. There's plenty of corrective exercises and mobility and stability exercises to work through that. People wonder all the time, for example, if they're doing an overhead squat or if they're trying to push more weight vertically, something like that, and they say, hey, my shoulders, I feel pain in my shoulders, how do I get my shoulders stronger to do this? And a lot of times you can have that person do an example of an overhead squat in front of you, getting the bar, or just doing it with a dowel or their hands, and when they're squatting, a lot of times they'll say, you need to work on foot stability or ankle mobility. And they'll say, no, my shoulders. And I'll say, yeah, but you don't realize that it's coming from your ankles. So if your ankles aren't mobile enough, you need to create more mobility during mobility drills. A little bit of certain type of stretching. You also need to create a stable foot environment. If you think about this, you're taking however many steps a day. You're on your feet all day. When you're in the gym, you're on your feet. You're doing leg workouts. Everything goes through your foot. It has to go through your foot to get up. That's where the force is generated from. So you got to take care of your feet. That's rolling your feet up with like a golf ball or some sort of foam roller. Doing some stretching with the toes and things like that, ankles, calf stretching. For an example, you have this little guy here. You just step on it, you can stretch out your calves and work on some mobility with your ankles. Bosu balls work really well with this, just creating a more advantageous environment for your body. And then you work your way up and down the ladder here. Again, unless I see something that's really drastic, I kind of start there. And you can work on them all at once. A lot of times I'll tell people to start with their foot and ankles. Warming up. Very critical in any kind of workout that you do. Definitely specific for the deadlifts. If you're doing deadlifts that day, there are specific warm-ups that you can go through and do yourself to help get you where you want to be. You're doing specific warm-ups for joints, and then most of them are for mobility, because in a sense you should be stable going into your workout if you've already worked on that. So again, your ankles, self-myofascial release. There's specific ankle drills, kind of some that we just mentioned. We'll go over a few in a video at the end here, and then there's stretches as well. So with myofascial release, you can see that's also on the hips and the T-spine. An example would be a foam roller. We have a couple of them here. Lacrosse balls are really good. There's a couple other different types of myofascial release gadgets or tools out there that you can use. Myself and a few clients have a special type of trigger point ball. It looks like a big globe. It's got little pieces in there. It's hard and it really fits into your muscles and grooves, and it acts like a trigger point as well. Hips are also another big joint to work on. There's the hip drill that I have a lot of my clients do. It's finding a wall and sticking their butt back and teaching their body how to push their hips back and not just bending over and trying to do a deadlift that way. A lot of times we'll bend from the waist, not the hips. A couple other good stretches. Spider-Man stretch, yogaplex, and other yoga movements. There's obviously plenty more. We'll go through a couple of them when that air crescent more at the bottom here. Your T-spine, your thoracic spine. You can see on here, we got T1 through T2. That creates the thoracic curvature in your spine. That needs to be mobile to help you through this. Okay? Now some of that comes from where the shoulder blades kind of are. So obviously you're more stable up top, and then it gets kind of mobile throughout here. And that can also be released through myofascial stuff, and then also through some drills and stretches. Jordan Syatt does a really good bench T-spine stretch, and obviously everybody else does this too. But Jordan Side Fitness, he'll introduce himself and all that stuff with the volume. What he's talking about here is what this mobility drill is for. Find a bench or some sort of elevated surface, and it's for creating thoracic mobility. A lot of people lack this, especially with kyphotic shoulders. So what he's doing here is he's pressing his elbows into the floor, creating a stable environment throughout. And when he's doing this, you're not going to drop your whole entire back. You're literally going to see what he's saying right there. You're literally trying to push your upper back kind of down towards the floor while pulling back. If you want to, you can hold like a dowel and squeeze this behind you to create that kind of retraction of the shoulder blades and then releasing that. So you're trying to almost push your chest to the floor, and that'll help a little bit with thoracic mobility. Okay, all that worked for about 20 seconds of stuff. Here's a little drill, a few drills from Eric Cressy. He goes through a whole like 4-minute video here of how to warm up. This is a guy that I really look up to. He's from Cressy Performance. He's kind of known as the baseball trainer. He trains all kinds of baseball athletes throughout the off season and in season as well. We had a trainer here, almost a trainer here, that actually is doing an internship with this guy right now, Brooks Braga, and he's out there. He should be just about done. This is a hip flexor stretch. Hip flexors are located pretty much at the top of the leg in front here. A lot of people suffer from really tight hip flexors, and doing this, you're just finding a wall, going into this half kneeling stance, grabbing the back leg, make sure that front foot's locked in, and you are moving forward. As you move forward, you get that nice stretch in the hip flexor. Notice how his body's really neutral here. There's not really any curvature at all. He's very stable in this environment. Obviously, you'll do that on each side 8 times. Huge stretch here. What he's also working on a little bit is some ankle mobility, which now they're getting into right here. If you wanted to, you can even progress this drill by pushing your knee further and keeping that weight through your heels, and you're actually working on ankle mobility going through that whole thing. Supine bridge with reach. This is working on some hip mobility here, also creating that stable environment in the hips. But you can notice here there's a big thoracic spine mobility drill. Coming down through each rep, squeeze, and then flipping over and reaching. Toes are fully planted, pushing through the heels.
Feet stay firmly down.
Yep.
Your core is tight as well.
Probably not super tight, but engaged, I would say. Just kind of going through it. You're working more on that mobility through the upper back too. Here's a yoga push-up. If you can't do a normal push-up through this, that's fine. You can do a scapular plank mobility drill. Otherwise, you can just go back and forth into this downward dog. Also a huge stretch. You create the stable environment through the shoulders here, shoulder blades, which is what she's talking about. You get some mobility through your shoulders, but huge stretch from the hips down to the ankles, and watch his feet go all the way to the ground. That's really hard to do. Really hard. A lot of people will struggle like crazy through that until over time they kind of get this. But you're pushing against the floor, driving your shoulders into your back, creating that stable environment. Again, he's got that push up there, pushing back. Yeah, and you don't have to do a push-up if you can't.
So you can just be going back and forth.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'll just have people do that scapular plank where they just squeeze the shoulder blades in, pop up, and then do the downward dog. Here's our Spider-Man lunge, and he adds a little hip lift and overhead reach. This is one of my favorite all-time warm-up drills right here. Spider-Man lunge, do the little high knee pull, coming down in the lunge here, driving your back heel towards the wall behind you, creates that hip lift, and you're back down with your inside arm, bracing it against your knee, and now you're following your hand up to the ceiling, and this is a huge thoracic spine mobility drill right here. So in a sense, this is about 4 exercises in one. The first one, you get your knee pull, going down into the Spider-Man lunge, going back into the hip lift, and now the overhead reach. Notice how he follows his hand with his eyes and his head. Okay? He's not just reaching back and then looking up afterwards. He's following his hand the whole way through that. tons and tons and tons of mobility drills from Eric Cressy and Jordan Snyder online. These are just two that I used for this clinic. EricCressy.com, ScienceFitness.com. Jordan Snyder will give you a handbook for free that includes all the warm-ups that you could ever want. You click on one and then it goes right to his YouTube page, shows you how to do it step by step. Eric Cressy's is all online, he pretty much does the same exact thing. So, later on, this is a picture of a guy doing a deadlift from the internet, nothing major. Notice again, kind of from a, not really a side view or a frontal view, but over 45 degrees from that. Chest is up, head is up. He's probably got his head a hair high, but nothing crazy because the spine is still in line. That's pretty much past. If you were to look at the spinal picture there, he's probably just fine. Butt is down. Shins are not quite vertical. So again, he's in a setup position. He's not pulling yet.
So if the butt goes up, the shin should be.
Yeah, if you're ready to pull, and you're just about ready to do that first pull, his butt should be going back to create that vertical shin. That is allowed as long as when you're pulling, you do have the vertical shins. Scooching over to the next picture here, you can see how that kind of goes through that whole angle thing, 10 degrees over. Vertical shins are nearly vertical, and look at the environment of the angles. There's no curvature, there's straight lines all the way through. And then the picture next to it shows the diagram of how the body actually looks. There's also a little center of access line here where the line of force goes through. The bar, right through the middle of the foot, up through the hands, right through, and dissects the shoulder blades. That's your most advantageous position. That's what you're looking for every time you do a deadlift. How we don't work. Yeah, you can laugh at these for a little while now. You know what good form looks like. Yeah. These are what we call, I guess trainers call YMCA deadlifts. This is when you do deadlifts and don't know what the hell you're doing because you just see other people doing it at the Y. No structure. These people also haven't looked, besides the picture on here, at how their deadlift form actually looks like. Hopefully these pictures were taken by a trainer that then worked on them. I couldn't find these same people in a before and after. I wish I could have. Maybe I overlooked it. But you can see like this guy, huge rounding of the back. You know, if you were to draw the line that's going up like this, his legs are straight. Yeah, his shins are vertical. They're probably past vertical. But then there's like a huge loop and back up and down. Shoulder blades aren't locked in. I mean, I can go all day on this one. The guy next to him, his butt's back, but it's up. Okay, it's not down. And then he's also got the lordotic rounding back here instead of the curvature, the flatter back that you want. And then all of a sudden, boom, his head shoots way up. Now he's looking forward, but he's also, again, not engaging his shoulder blades. His chest is facing forward. This is more of like a push-up, and he's going to hurt his back. They both are. Okay? Unfortunately, we have a lot of people in the gyms that look like this when they do deadlifts, and hence why I had a deadlift clinic today. And I was hoping those people would show up here. They didn't. But, yeah. Yeah. But, yeah, that's how not to do a deadlift. A couple more. Not quite as severe in the one on the left, but you can still see he's kind of struggling with a little form there. That's probably what we see the most, is something like that. It's just that rounding, a severe rounding of the back. This guy is a prime example. He probably had his butt back enough and vertical shins, did not engage his shoulder blades at all. So now he is not working from pretty much the hips up because they're not engaged. So he's not using his lat muscles. He's barely using his arms. He's probably hurting his shoulders there, but got a countless number of things, including his lower back. Yeah, not good. Again, I couldn't find pictures of the before and after of this one. This is a really nasty one. This guy probably suffers from a little bit of kyphotic shoulders. As you can see, he's got his head up, and it almost looks like he's got his chest up or trying to, but he's probably got a severe rounding of the upper shoulders, which is kyphotic shoulders. And again, I'm not really sure what's going on because it looks like somebody behind him is doing some form of deadlift as well. So maybe he's at some sort of deadlift clinic and they're showing snapshots before and after. But you can see, I think that looks like a lot of weight on there. And it looks like he's actually squeezing pretty hard, so hopefully he was okay after that one. Let's go over form one more time. Vertical shins. Looking at this guy right here, it's slightly forward, but again, it's mostly vertical. On that pull up, it probably goes vertical. Straight back, having maybe that slight lordotic curvature down there, and you're pulling through the hips. And I drew that line all the way across. You're pulling those hips in to create that stable environment when you're up. Okay, looking at it in real time, this is Alexa at 190 pounds. Alexa is here today, and I'm going to kind of go through why I had her doing what she did on here to pulling up a deadlift. She does have a little bit of the curvature, but she corrects it with her form. Now, I have her rolling forward, and boom, right there she creates that stable, right where that little flash happened, she created that stable environment. So, today when we were working on that, we were struggling a little bit to getting the form down, so I actually had her resetting each time through the rep, and 190 pounds was, I think it was like 90% of your max, 95, something like that, pretty close. So obviously 2 reps at that is pretty intense. She's definitely stronger enough to do more, but we hadn't done deadlifts in like 2 weeks, and I pretty much threw her under the rug and had her do some for me because I told her we needed a video. So we'll watch it again real quick. That first one, nice back there, pulls it through. Shoulder blades could have been a little bit more tighter, but not much. It's a lot of heavy weight, so it's harder to do. Vertical shins, and boom, she gets it there. Okay? When you get to heavy weight like that, your back will round slightly on your way up. It has to. When you get to heavy weight for your own body, you can't expect to be straight the entire way through. That's a lot of pressure on your shoulder blades, but that's why you engage your shoulder blades. That way your lats can hold you stable, so you're able to do stuff like that. Okay? She's probably due the next couple weeks for another one rep max test. She's been working on them. So. 205 right now, but she'll jump up past that in no time. So, looking at the next video here.
That's a 7'5" junior high school basketball player.
I know, I watched him.
That was unbelievable. I watched that.
Junior high.
This is our manager. This is our manager over at the Crescent, Nicole, and this is her 1 rep max. So as you can see, she kind of sets up here. I'll pause this and blow it up. I have her down in this position because when you set up for a big 1 rep deadlift, the last thing you want to do is hang over the bar in a set position for an extended period of time. In a sense, you're ruining all the potential energy that you have to make this pull happen. You think about how you're doing it, you're setting up over the bar, your back's getting stretched out right now, your hamstrings are getting a little tight. You're continuously down here, your shoulder blades are probably getting a little tight because you have them pulled back. So I have her taking one knee when she's strapped up for deadlifts, because before that, when she's using wrist straps, she would just hang over top of it and then try and get set in it and then try and pull up. Her body's already tired by then. It might not seem like a lot, but it's the same thing of why when you go heavy on bench press, you should have somebody actually hand off the bench to you. You waste more energy than what you think grabbing that bar off the hooks and doing your bench off of it. Okay? Same reason again if you want to go through the squat. You don't want to unrack your squat and find a sweet spot and shuffle your feet 20 times before you actually do a squat. You want to take your step back, take your other step to level you off, and you're down. Okay, so that's also part of the technique on squatting. You want to learn how to get back into your squat position sooner than what it is before taking time, making sure your core is tight. That's got to be ready to go. Same thing with the deadlift. She's already thinking about it. You can see she's in her Zen-like zone here. I don't think she's listening to music. She probably is. I can't remember. She's looking straight ahead. She's already knowing she's going to rip this guy up. I'm not saying a word to her until she actually starts to pull. She didn't even remember me talking to her anyway. So this is a true good 1 rep max here. So we'll watch it. She looks down, make sure everything's set. I said as soon as she takes that step forward into the deadlift, she's pulling. Grip and rip. Here it goes. Boom. Down. And you can see she's all kinds of happy at that. She blew up when she looked at me. We'll watch it one more time so you can kind of see this all the way through. Again, Zen-like state. Yeah. Not thinking about anything. I'm yelling at her at one point here to pull her hips in because you can see her almost get stuck, and all of a sudden it looks like it's just meant to be. right there, I say hips, boom, she pulls them in, down, and she explodes, and she's happy. Yeah.
How much weight was that?
225. I tried 235 with her right after that, and didn't hit it. Couldn't even pull it off the ground. One, we probably used just about every ounce of strength that she had, because that was like her 7th or 8th set that day. Two, there's a lot more things going into the deadlift than just that whole stuff. Maybe she needs to work a little bit on some leg strength to be able to push into the ground a little harder, or to keep her body stable. I shouldn't say push, but to keep her body leveled into the ground. And going over some assistance work, which is what I'm going to cover next. Big time with her, what we had a little bit of trouble with was actually the grip. So that's why we ended up strapping her up. Before that, it was pretty gruesome trying to do everything. So didn't really work too well. Okay, so why should we do deadlifts? I guess before we get into that assistance work, we'll cover this. It improves numerous abilities: strength, nervous system, athletic ability. The list literally goes on and on and on and on and on. Posture is also a huge one. Deadlifts improves posture. I have every one of my clients doing deadlifts, except for maybe 2, I guess. Everybody. Doesn't matter the age, they're all doing deadlifts. It hits nearly every muscle in your body. The only thing it really doesn't hit too much is your chest, so a really good superset with a deadlift is some sort of bench press or push-up. Get 100% of the body moving. Again, like I already covered, it improves posture, and it zaps the posterior chain. Your posterior chain is pretty much everything lit up in blue on here, and in a sense, these are some muscles, but it's also your nervous system. You get a huge spike in nervous system activity from doing deadlifts, especially when you go heavy. There's been plenty of times when I start getting up into that 1 rep range, or doing like a heavy set of 5, and you feel wired after you're done. You literally feel like you can jump 20 feet in the air, and you're just kind of moving, and you're almost maybe shaking a little bit, and it's just because your nervous system is so fired up from that, yeah, and that's kind of where the deadlift kicks in. Not necessarily a bad thing, but when you do that, you want to make sure, like, you might feel like Superman or Superwoman for a little while. Just keep that in mind. If you go into like the next exercise, it doesn't mean that you're still heavy just because you feel good that day too. Again, there's been plenty of days when I've tried that. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. All right, assistance work. You got to think about what's preventing you from proper form. This is kind of the list that I go in when going through a procedure with somebody like this. Start with mobility, always, number 1. 2, start with stability. 3, then go to strength, and 4, then you work on technique. Okay, technique's the last thing. That's when you can really start hitting PRs, when you go through little things like pulling your body away from the floor, pulling your hips towards the mirror, gripping the floor, kind of like those other coaching cues that I mentioned earlier. But always starting with mobility. This is kind of like that story where I said earlier, where the guy's shoulders hurt, and I said, show me an overhead squat, and I said, you need to work on your foot and ankle, foot stabilization, especially ankle mobility, and he's like, no, my shoulder hurts, I need to get my shoulder stronger. So yeah, work on ankle stuff. I've heard countless times again on the people that I follow, they said the same exact thing. Same exact thing, word for word. Muscles that you can work to kind of help get you stronger at this. Glutes, hamstrings, your lats, your lower traps and rhomboids, which is essentially your shoulder blade scapula area, and erector spinae, which is that lower back. And there's other muscles in there as well. Exercises for this: a glute ham raise or bridge. You kind of saw in that Eric Cressy video, the guy doing the glute ham raise with the reach. If you just do standard glute ham raises, single leg, elevated, with medicine ball, with weight, you can do hip bridges, throw a barbell over your hips and do some stuff like that. All of that will help. Hip and back extensions. Hip extensions are essentially our back extension machine, the free weight one, but I say it's hip because you should be working more of your glutes and hamstrings, not your lower back on that. The back extension is that machine in the circuit that is up here that you can work your lower back and the erector spine. Rope pull-throughs. I don't have a video of this, but that's grabbing a rope, putting it on a cable, and setting it up almost like you're in a deadlift, and you're literally pulling the rope through and squeezing your glutes at the top. Kind of puts it in a little different dimension as the weights behind you on the cables, and it's not below you, so there's really no gravity. It's more like a pulley. And then the kettlebell deadlifts, that's working for a lot of like deloading stuff, and a lot of people to start deadlifting. Kettlebells are a good place to start just because the handle up on them allows you to have the proper form and gets you into that proper form. Center of mass stays right below you instead of you reaching out, anything like that. There's a lot more to that too, but these are some of the big ones. Variations of deadlifts. There's plenty of those besides what I just talked about with like the kettlebell and the pull through. There's a conventional deadlift. That's exactly what we've been talking about all day today. That's just the standard one. Dynamic or speed deadlifts. Sometimes those are interchanged. That's why they're both on there. Rack pulls or elevated deadlifts. That is setting the bar on a rack or having the deadlift, the weights actually start in an elevated surface. What that does is it allows people that aren't quite as mobile yet, or mobile in general, to still do a deadlift. So if they can't get down all the way to the ground to pick up that bar, then you set it on an elevation, so boom, they're right there. I also have some taller clients that prefer that method too. Sometimes it's just because their lower back's not quite strong enough yet, or their lower back might not be quite there, or it just might be they're too tall. But I don't want to say that's too much of the reason, but it might just be that they're too tall for normal conventional deadlifts. Sumo deadlifts, take a wide sumo stance. That allows you to grip the bar a little bit easier, so you don't have to grip so wide, so you're actually not pulling quite as far. You can take off 2 or 3 inches sometimes by gripping the bar in a sumo deadlift and pulling that way. The wider stance also allows your hips to go back easier, so this is a good one to do for people. You can see like a conventional stance. I'm here, yeah, my hips can go back, it's pretty easy to do so, but if I'm out in that sumo style, it's really easy to feel the hamstring stretch right there and the hips just almost fall back into place. It's kind of a nice little thing to throw in the mix every once in a while. I think numerous other people can pull more weight in the sumo deadlift. So what I'll try to do is start with a sumo deadlift at a higher weight, and then I'll work my conventional deadlift to reach there. Just because you put yourself in I feel like I'm more advantageous in the sumo because my hips are back, you feel my hamstrings working a little bit more, and all that good stuff.
So you'll start with the sumos,
For a heavier weight, and then I'll work up to it.
and you work up,
Yeah.
you go to your conventional there.
Yeah. And what I'll do is I'll do my 1 rep maxes at sumos first, the first time, and then I'll base that percentage on my conventional stuff off that sumo deadlift, and I'll try it the next one at conventional, and I'll flip back and forth. Banded or chained deadlifts, we don't really have the ability to do those at this facility, but that's putting like bands on the edges of the bar or chains on the edges of the bar to create a different effect. Louis Simmons at Westside Barbell is pretty much like the founder of this. All of his programs are pretty much based on a dynamic deadlift program or weighted program for lower body. They do a conventional one on Mondays, and like 3 days later they'll do a dynamic effort, and a lot of times they'll go by percentages. So they'll do like 50% of your 1 rep max with actual weight, with 25% banded or chain, but usually it's bands is what they prefer. And then the next week they'll go to like 55% of the weight, 25% band, and they'll go 60% of weight, 25% band. They add it's more of a speed complex. If you think about like a resistance band going around the...
Instead of a weight?
It's both, but if you think about like a band being pulled at the edges of the bar here, it's going to try and pull you down faster, pull the bar down faster. So it just creates more of an eccentric pull. You're working more on the speed of the whole thing.
So you're not putting a lot of weight on.
50% of, I mean, they defer each program, but they're starting to like if a guy can deadlift, we'll go 500 pounds. They'll put 250 pounds of actual weight on the bar, and then they'll put 125 pounds of banded resistance
So it's
on the bar.
back down the band?
Yeah, it's both. They'll be attached to the bar so that when they pull up, it gets tighter as they
And then
pull,
they're hooked
and
on
it
something?
pulls them down. Below them. It's hooked on an anchor below.
On the floor.
Yeah. I probably should have put one of those on here. You can look them up.
I thought you added the band up here.
No, it's on the floor. They do them with squats, they do them with bench press. You can look them up, it's pretty cool stuff. We We can try to do it here, but it's pretty time consuming. So rather than wasting my time or wasting a client's time,
Plus we just have to have anchors in the ground.
Yeah.
there's ways that you can, yeah,
You could go to the 2 racks out there.
yeah.
Between the 2 racks.
Yeah, there's ways. It's just, like I said, it's really time consuming. It's a lot more work. It'd be something to do on a weekend type thing. If clients are interested in something like that, we can try it. But yeah, the deficit deadlifts, those really are mostly frowned upon, I guess, in the whole industry. There's no real mechanical advantage to them compared to studies, but there's obviously research that says different for everything. That's when you start at a higher surface than the bars below you. So if I had a conventional deadlift and I put like a step, a small step, and I stepped onto that, and now I'm reaching down to grab this guy, yeah. Some people try because it's been said to work a little bit better, but now there's research coming out there and says like, no, you shouldn't even try to attempt to do these there.
Aren't you going to get that over almost too far?
Yeah, some guys are mobile enough. So.
It's going to be weak.
Yeah.
Pulling a lot of weight would be harder.
Yeah, yeah, and I should add, in the dynamic deadlifts, don't go that heavy. Usually it's between like 40 and 70% of what your max is. And that kind of differs, if you go through the weekly programs or some sort of progression periodization type thing. That's not something where you want to throw like 95% on and try 1 repper. Those are usually between like maybe 2 and 8 reps, 3 and 8 reps. And at a percentage like 40 to 70, somewhere in there. There's plenty more out there, but then another type of variation, like I mentioned before, is a kettlebell deadlift. We do have a 45-pound kettlebell deadlift in here, or a kettlebell now, so you can do some deadlifts with that to help get you going, get your body warmed up. Obviously, there's heavier. Kind of setting up a structure for deadlifts. You can usually be set up for twice a week. If you do like heavy deadlifts on Monday, which is usually what I do, it's kind of what the Westside Barbell guys usually do as well. You want to think that there is 72 hours rest in between that day and the next time you do deadlifts, no matter what it is. If you're feeling really good, maybe you didn't quite go heavy. If you didn't go heavy on Monday, you can maybe do them a couple days later. Maybe you can sneak in that 3rd day. If it's just like a set or two, kind of like almost like just a form type thing, or maybe you go really heavy on that day, whatever it is. Conventional versus dynamic, you shouldn't be going conventional every single time you come in. You should always be doing 1 conventional day and then maybe a dynamic day somewhere in there too. I have on here separated by at least 48 hours. A lot of times the research will say, and Westside Barbell guys will say 72 hours, and that's just for optimal results. An example, Monday you can do in a conventional 5x5. That usually means you're going pretty damn heavy. 5 reppers are somewhere around like the 90 percentile range, give or take. And then come Wednesday, you can do a dynamic 3x8. So it's a little bit lighter, 3 sets, cut back some volume and intensity. But preferably that would be like a Thursday. Here's more of a structured program. Monday, conventional 3x8, then Friday, dynamic 2x5. That's extremely heavy. No, sorry, that's not that heavy. That's just 2 sets of 5. Oh yeah, it's heavier for the dynamic phase. You can even do like a 5-7-2 on that day if you want to go like more into that 70%, maybe 75% range in that. You can go through and do one of the choices of the dynamic. Final words, be smart about deadlifts. Again, if you can, try to get a picture or a video of you doing a deadlift so you can actually see what's going on. Sometimes that kind of helps you realize things, rather than have somebody stand at the side of you and yell at you, no, get your butt back, no, get your hips down, no, shins have got to be vertical. It might help for you to actually see stuff. Otherwise, you can just look up deadlifts. I mean, there's obviously some bad ones out there, but the majority of things, I looked it up on YouTube the other day, and the majority of them you'll just see like big muscle-bound guys doing world records. There was just one broken in at the Arnold Classic about a month ago. A guy did like I think it was like a 1,300-pound deadlift or something. Yeah, pretty insane. Pretty insane stuff. Strength and speed matter. So that's kind of like the whole power equation. Strength over time or speed. The quicker you can be, also the more stronger you are, the more powerful you're going to become. That's kind of where these power movements like bench press, squat, and deadlifts matter. Don't be nice do a controlled drop. And what I mean by that is also be loud. If you're afraid of people looking at you while you're in the gym, dropping the bar, and I don't mean just dropping the bar, but doing a controlled drop, don't try to be fancy and set it down all nice and be ready to pull back up that way. Throw some mats on the floor, throw double mats on the floor if you want to. The part where you go down, the downward phase of the deadlift, where you're coming back to the floor, is going to be where you're going to get hurt, usually. That's when it kind of kicks in. That's your eccentric phase of the deadlift. That's when your back muscles are being stretched out, but they're also being contracted because you're holding on to this huge amount of weight. So you want to be a controlled drop. Don't be nice, be loud. Okay? Don't forget your deload weeks. This is very important if you ever want to get stronger. Deload weeks are cutting back on intensity and volume, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't go heavy for a set. It means that you only deload one set of heavy weight. Usually you're working on some assistance stuff in this week to help get you ready, unless you're on an assistance-based program. But the deloads are going to be most likely if you're on a structured deadlift or squat, bench press type of program. The deloads are what's going to be holding you back if you don't have them right now. You got to do them. A lot of times guys will do them the week before they test out, and then sometimes they'll do them right afterwards too. Grip and rip. That video that I showed earlier of Nicole, when I had her down on the ground and had her get in her zen-like state and be ready to rip up, I told her not to waste any time when she got ready. Put the knee up, get the bar ready, and grip and rip. Again, you don't want to be down in that position because you're going to go through a phase where you're losing potential energy that you need for your deadlift, especially if you're doing a 1 rep max. I mean, you want everything you can in 1 rep, and you don't want to be taking anything away. I don't have this on there, but again, be careful of form. If you're not paying attention to form, or if you don't have that video or picture of yourself, your body's always going to resort to the most strong position that it knows. And a lot of times that's going to put you in bad form, so you got to become stable before you become mobile, and then work on mobility after that. So if you're not doing those things, your body's going to try and switch back to what it knows is to be the most strongest form, and that's probably where a lot of those guys came from earlier. Their body just didn't know any better, and they were doing those nasty deadlifts. That's the end of the show. Is there any questions?
If you're working up to a heavy day, how much warm-up lifting deadlift should you do before you get?
I always say that depends on the person. I'll probably get a bunch of crap for saying this stuff, but I'm more of the guy, if it takes you 10 sets to get up to your 1 rep set, and you still get higher or still do it,
You can still feel it.
then do it. If you're one that feels like you should only be doing a couple sets here and there and then getting up to your 1 repper, then you do that. A lot of times if you're repping out at like, you're going to try for 400 pounds, your first set should be about 50% of that. So you're going to want to put 200 pounds on the bar and start with that. Now, 400 pounds is a huge deadlift, and 200 pounds for your first set of the day is pretty heavy. I always start with 135, and then I go from there. 8 to 10 reps, and I just base it on how I feel and start climbing up. On your warm-up sets, after your mobility and stability drills are done, your warm-up sets, you're thinking about all the things you need to think about with technique. You're not sitting there just going through the grind and pulling the weight up. You're thinking about the vertical shins, the shoulder blades locked, pulling the hips in, core tight, exhaling on your way up, squeezing the glutes in all the way up, and then controlled drop on the way down. That's not something that you just warm up to just do stuff. You're actually going through a mental progression as well when you're getting ready to pull that big weight. So honestly, Larry, it depends on the person.
But when you're getting near your max, are you just doing 1 and adding weight, or are you doing 2 adding weight?
If you're testing for a 1 rep max, again, it kind of depends on the person. I'm going to get yelled at this. I know if somebody watches this, will say something, but if you go up to your 1 rep max and you're feeling good, bump it up. I mean, if you want to try one more, try one more.
You know what I'm
Give
saying?
yourself enough time of rest.
If I'm right now around 270, 75, somewhere in there, when I'm at about 235, and I've done, say, 3 there, from now on, do I just do 1, add weight, do 1, add weight, do 2, add weight?
You can do, yeah, you can do one like that.
How much
Just
energy
scale
do
it
you
by
want
one
to
at a time.
spend
Exactly.
leading up to this?
Exactly, that kind of depends on the person again. If you know, like at 235, that you can do 3, 1 maybe that's all you need just to kind of get your body used to feeling that weight, then you throw a little more on, then you do your 1, then you throw a little more on, and 1. If you know you can do 5 there because you've been going through a structured routine, so that's, the 235 is probably pretty close to like 95% of your max. You should probably only be able to do 1, maybe 2. If you can do 3, your max is definitely higher than it was before. So then that automatically should send a signal to you saying like, oh, I'm going to definitely go higher than 275, I'm going to 280 today, I'm going to 285, something like that. Because in a sense you're already stronger. So you know that right away. If your 1 rep max doesn't go that well that day, keep in mind what you did. Maybe you did 3 reps at that 235, and then you get to 280 and you can't pull it off the ground. There's your sign right there, like I wasted too much earlier. You're also giving yourself plenty of rest in between. Working with heavier weights, 3 to 5 minutes rest in between each set. It's not something that you want to try and go balls to the wall and lift up right away. You gotta give your body time to cool down, nervous system time to cool down.
Yeah, how much, say it's a back day, you've done your deadlifts, how much, do other heavy back stuff or just do?
Yeah, if you feel good, you can do it. Usually if you're doing deadlifts on a back day, everything else besides a row, it's not really going to put you in a bad position to do any damage.
That stuff?
Yeah, that's all going to be good. You might be a little more fatigued. You might be a little jacked up for a little while by the time that workout's done.
Yeah, you come off that, you're really.
Yeah. Yep. You might be a little more jacked up, so maybe you're getting a little more done. The bent over row obviously is going to be a little harsh, so I would say do that right away, right after the deadlifts are done, if you have them on your schedule that day. Otherwise, maybe you put single arm dumbbell rows
I know
instead.
if you do them on an incline bench, you kind of got support.
Yep, or that, yep, the drag rows or the single arm rows on the bench, stuff like that. Okay?
Still technique.
Yeah. After you get everything else figured out, it's all technique from there. Still learning, so.